everybody. Hi, it's Becky from PowerToolsWithThread.com. All right, are you guys ready to sew together the February table topper? I've got one up here. Some of you have mentioned that I didn't get my stripes right on my corners, and so I took it apart and I sewed it again, and I sewed it again wrong. So that's the way it's supposed to be. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and make the heart blocks. That gets done first. And then these are plain blocks right here. And this is a 9 patch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then from there, we're going to put on 2 side borders and 2 more. These are your inner borders. And then from there, we are going to sew on the triangles. If you have a directional pattern, or maybe you have different fabrics, you might want to make sure the directional pattern is going the right way. And then once we get these triangles on, then we're going to go ahead and put on the outer borders, and 2 of the outer borders have cornerstones on each end of them. For mine, because of my fabric, I have not done 2 pieces like the book said to do 2 pieces, which I did here. I have got just 1 single piece for mine instead of 2. On the triangle pieces, you want to go ahead and put some SF 101 on the back and adhere that on there. That's going to keep you from getting any puckers or any kind of unnecessary drama that we don't need. And that way your satin stitching, because these have a satin stitch all the way around them, it's real possible for you to get some puckering because of that. If it was a blanket stitch, then I wouldn't really worry about it, but with satin stitching, it's a real possibility. So just to keep anything from happening, go ahead and put some SF 101 on the back of the square that you cut up to make your triangles. And you really don't need to put it on anything else on the topper. And it doesn't really change the hand of the topper at all, since it's either going to be hanging on a wall or sitting on a table. You're never going to be really handling it and feel it. It's not going to be that big of a deal. In the pattern book, under February, it gives you the list of the fabrics that you're going to need. And then down here, there's a little rotary cutter, and it says cut the following. Everywhere that it said to cut whatever number of this and whatever number of that, I took my pen and I labeled them A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And those alphabet letters, I keep wanting to say numbers, letters, correspond to the alphabetes or alphabet tiles that I have on my project board. So you're going to hear me saying, take one letter D and attach it to a letter B. And that is what I'm talking about. That way I don't give away the pattern. So those of you that have the pattern book, if you want to label down here in the bottom part, cut the following. From fabric 1, that is A. Fabric 2, that is B. Fabric 3 has 3 cuts. So that is C, D, and E. Fabric 4 has 3 cuts. That is F, G, and H. Fabric 5 has 1 cut, which is I, and fabric 6 has 1 cut, and that is J. Okay? So I hope that's clear as mud. Let's go over to the machine. We're ready to get started. This is the Brother PQ 1500 piecing machine. It has a 1/4 inch foot on it, and I am using a 7511 needle in here, and I have a 2.5 inch stitch length set, and I am just ready to go. You also might find it handy to have yourself a little ironing station here. I have a trash can down here for threads and whatnot. And then I've got myself a little ironing station. This is my Cricut mini iron. I just love this thing because it doesn't have any steam in it, and it is motion sensitive, so you have to lift it up like every 13 minutes. But putting this together, that's not that big of a deal. So the first thing we need to do is to take a fabric D. There were 16 fabric D. All 16 of these fabric D
need to be sewn in what's called the turn and flip method. And in order to do this so it doesn't make you crazy, I'm going to take a fabric B here and show you. The whole point of this is so that you have this sewn exactly as a little triangle like this, and that triangle sits in the corner of your fabric like that. And when it's sewn properly, it looks like it becomes one with the fabric. So it then becomes the corner of this rectangle. From the back, it measures the same and you cannot tell the difference. That's the idea. The easiest way to do that I have found is to take a little ruler, and you want to put the ruler exactly corner to corner on the diagonal on that little piece. And you can see there's a piece of fabric under the ruler, half of it is under the ruler, and half of it is not under the ruler. You want to take a marker, hold your ruler in place, and draw a line. Now remember we said, I'm going to turn this so you can see it. Remember we said that the ruler was exactly corner to corner. That means the line is not corner to corner. The line is just 2 threads or so, maybe 3 on the other side. So that means that one side of this is shorter, smaller than the other. And that side is the side that is hanging out from underneath the ruler. That's important because that is the side that's going to be cut off. Let's do it again. We have this little piece. This blue line is your sew line. You're going to sew on that line. You're going to put your ruler exactly corner to corner. Hold the ruler in place, draw a line, and then make a little mark so you know which corner of this fabric goes into the corner to be trimmed away. And you can make quick work of this by just doing them one after another. I'm going to put the ruler corner to corner, so I'm going to make the line next to the ruler. So the line is on the short side, and I'm going to mark the short side. That's the side that will be cut off, the side with the mark. This is part of what is called assembly line sewing. So you're marking all of your pieces at one time. If you sew exactly corner to corner, instead of marking just to the side of it, when you go to fold this half over, it's not going to be long enough. Because your stitch line, it's a term in the garment sewing industry called turn of cloth. Your stitch line is going to take up a couple of threads. And those threads are inside of the fold. So if your stitch line is exactly corner to corner, then the side that you're going to fold over onto it is going to be too short. They don't teach that in quilting classes, and they should, because it matters. And that is something I struggled with until I was sitting there one day. I don't know why, it just, the term turn of cloth came to me from my garment sewing days, and I was like, well, duh. Why didn't I know that before? And ever since I started doing this method. Now when you get good and you're used to doing this like I am, you don't have to mark these. I might mark them on larger blocks if it's going to be pretty big, but you don't have to mark them. You can start your needle and end your needle just to the side of the corner, and I use the red line either side of the red line is probably about 1/16 of an inch wide, and I use either side of that red line as my guideline for the bottom point. to sew it through. This is how you make sure each one of these is going to be right. Don't forget to make that little mark. You need to know which side, because if you don't make the mark, you can put the wrong side to the corner and you'll sew it. So now what I'm going to do on all of my fabric B, I'm going to sew, I'm going to take my part with the line on it. It's got the little mark, okay? The part with the little mark is in the outer corner. And now I'm going to sew on that line. Exactly on that line. And this line is on my diagonal seam tape in the red. Okay, I sewed exactly on the line, and now I'm going to fold it over, finger press it, just like I did before, and it fits perfectly. And from the back, it fits perfectly. You shouldn't have any of your fabric hanging over the edge. I'm going to press it. Don't swish. I'm just going to straight press it down. And I'm going to fold this back. I need my shears. Hold this back, and I'm going to cut this at 1/4 inch, approximately. And that's perfect. That's what you're looking for. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Put the piece with the mark in the corner. Sew exactly on the line. If you did it right, these two ought to meet in the center. I'll fold this up. And they meet perfectly. I'm going to press it. And I'm going to cut this to 1/4 inch. And that one is finished with those little pieces. So now I'm going to assembly line sew all of my fabric B. I'm going to do one side first and then the other. Oh, don't tell me that. Oh, I think I'm out of bobbin. Dang it. Well, that last one was bobbin chicken, wasn't it? I won that. Yeah, I'm out. I've been sewing a lot today. You want to make sure that you fold this piece over before you trim it off. Make sure it fits. Look at that. Every one of mine are fitting. If you ever make a Lori Holt quilt, you absolutely need to know this technique. Absolutely. She uses this all the time, especially in her Farm Girl Vintage. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. You want to make sure that the mark is facing outward. That's the part that's going to be cut off. Okay, so we've got the tops all done, and now we need to take fabric E and we're going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to make a line on the back of fabric E. Now this can get confusing, so let's take 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to put these in a pile, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to put these in a pile. Okay, now on the back of here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a line. We're going to put the ruler exactly corner to corner. This is a friction marker, by the way. Comes off with heat. Okay, and we're going to make a mark, and we're going to do this to all of the fabrics. The idea is to cut off the outside corner of the heart. So these 4, we're going to take 4. It doesn't matter which 4. You're going to take 4, okay, and you want to fold this up. And this is the piece we're going to keep. This is the piece we're cutting off. Okay, just like that. So you can get a visual. You can see when we put these together, that's the piece I'm cutting off, the piece with the mark to the outside. So this one, 1, 2, 3, this is really easy to get confused, you guys, real easy. So we're going to fold it in half again, and we're going to put it like this, okay? This is what we're after, just like this. We're after just like this, okay? So now, this is what it should look like. The part with the mark is going to be to the outside corner of the heart, and this part with this mark is going to be to the outside corner of the heart. I'm going to sew one side at a time. So I'm going to align it exactly with the bottom, and I'm going to sew on the line. This is super easy to get confused. You'll have to go back and cut more if you screwed up. Okay, now the next ones. I only cut 4 off. I'm going to make sure these all fit. Yep. I'm going to stack all these up together. You guys, this is how you double check your work before you cut. Stack all those up together. All the pink or all of your coordinating fabric, your background fabric, should be to the same direction in the stack. And then if I put them together, they look right. That's what you're after. So now I'm ready to press these and then cut. And now we're ready to sew our 2 halves together. So this is where your seam nesting comes in. Now in this case, both of your seam allowances are going the same direction. So you're going to have to make one of them go down. And like in the video I showed, you want the seam allowance on the bottom of the heart, the seam allowance on the bottom facing toward you. So if I were to sew these together like this, I want this seam allowance away from me and I want this one toward me. And you don't necessarily have to go back to the ironing board. You can just kind of finger press it, and if you want, I am going to press mine. Okay, so the kind of rule of thumb on these is you want to press this one down on the bottom, and then you're going to press this one up on the top. So now my seam allowances are going different directions. So just like I showed in the video, put this on here. You want to start them apart from each other and get the edges even. Slide them down until they butt up against one another. All right, take a pin. We're going to go through the bottom of the seam allowance on one side of that seam line and out through the other. And do the same thing down here. Butt them together in one side of that seam allowance and out the other. Get my corners to match. I'm going to pull it straight. One stitch over that seam line, remove my pin. And if we did it right, our points match on the top, and we have a matched point and a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the bottom. That's exactly what you're after. You've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance here at the bottom, and you've got a point that matches right there, and your points match right down here. All of this on the sides and on the top is going to be captured in the seam allowance, so that's okay. And you need to finish sewing the other 3. Now, if you press your seams one direction on the back, that's just fine, and it does not matter. You can press them all the same direction. They're not going to be nesting in with anything, but I do recommend before you press it, go ahead and press it a little bit with the iron to kind of relax the fibers, and then give it a finger press so that it knows where you want it to go. Looks really good. Okay, I have all 4 of my hearts are done. I'm going to trim these loose threads just a little bit without changing the shape of the block. I'm just getting rid of some strings here. And we are ready to make the 9 patch. You will find the more you handle your blocks, the more strings you get. So if you can handle the block, ooh, I cut into that. If you can handle the block by the middle of it at all, not touch the sides if possible, that can be helpful. You see all these strings I got rid of? It's good. All right, so now we have a 9 patch. Now we need to make sure that your hearts are going, let me back out just a little bit. Need to make sure that your hearts are going different directions, like this. Okay, so you need to get your fabric A now, and your fabric A is going to go like this. And when you do this, I recommend that you do 1 row or 1 column, however your brain works is fine, but you just want to do 1 at a time. Sometimes people just do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then go back and sew 3, 4, 5. You can, but because it's important that these are all pointing different directions, it's really easy to get confused of which one you're doing and when. So I'm just going to start with these 2. Now, here's a concept I want to talk to you about. If I hold this up right here, can you see that there's more of fabric A? I've got more of fabric A up here than I have of my heart block. So, because this is on the bias, this piece right here is on the bias, and this piece right here is on the bias, as soon as you put it on the bias, it goes wonky. It's just going to do it. It's the nature of the beast. So can you see that little bit of fabric right there? This is my straight line. I trust my cut. I don't trust bias cut pieces. So when I sew, I'm not going to follow my top edge. I'm going to follow my cut. So when you have, and you're sewing bias cuts together, I might pin the top just till I get my first 2 stitches done. And I'm going to pin the 2 bottom corners. Even if they don't look like they will meet, they will, because you can actually coax this block so that it fits. I'm not going to sew, like I said, to the top block. My straight edge, that where my 1/4 inch line down here is going, is on the white fabric on the bottom, my bottom block. That one is straight. That's not a bias cut. That's really important. That's important for the size of your block. If I were to follow the pink, which is the top block, my block would be too short. So when you open this up, it fits just fine, of course, but it's good. Okay. Now, on these, it does matter which way your seam allowances go. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. Your seam allowances can either both go into the middle or they can go to the outside. I recommend doing it the way there's the least amount of bulk. So, because there's bulky seams right here on the heart, these really want to go this way. So that's the way they're going to go when I iron them. Okay, so this is what it looks like from the back. My seam allowances are facing toward the outside edge. That's the way it looks on the back. So now my seam allowances are pointing inward. And there's the back of that one. My seam allowances are facing outward. So I want to now 9 patch this, just like this. And again, I'm going to nest. These need to go down. So I need to sew it, let's see. This is where my head gets turned around. There we go. To sew it that direction. But those, match the edges, slide them until they butt up against one another. And now I'm go under the seam line of one seam allowance and out through the other. That's perfect. And whenever you're doing this and you're pinning, you want to pin from the middle first. You generally don't, on these long ones, you generally don't have to do the top ones. I would if I had triangles on both, but I've got one straight edge, so I'm okay. I'm trusting my straight edge fabric, not the fabric that's cut on the bias. That looks pretty good. That'll work. Okay, I'm ready to press it with the big iron, and it looks fabulous. How sweet is this? I love it. And we'll be ready to put the borders on. So what I'm doing first is just kind of coaxing my seam allowances to lay one way or the other. I don't care which, but I want them to be flat. Okay, this is nice and flat. If we did it right, it should measure exactly 11 inches on all 4 sides. If it does not, you need to take it over to your mat and give it a measure and go ahead and trim it up to make sure that these outer corners are at 11 inches on all 4 sides. Make sure you've got your 1/4 inch seam. You can trim it, but you want to make sure you've got 11 inches on your corners, and you can trim that off if it'll make it easier for you to sew. But just like before, you're going to trust your straight edge, and so when we sew on the borders, you're going to trust the straight edge of the border because that's a straight cut, because these might be a little weird. So you'll just have to kind of trust your straight edge cut. We're going to take fabric F and sew them on opposite sides of the block. It doesn't matter which side. I had left mine intentionally long. I just do that because it's easier for me to trim it up even. I know my block is 11, but this way I'm not stretching fabric. Where this point is right here, and you can see it better if I take a pin and see that point. If I put the pin in right on the point and push it straight up, you can see it. That's the point of that heart. And so I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to make a little landing strip. I'm going to move this. Okay. And I'm going to do it off the other side as well. That's the point I'm looking for right there to sew on, at, toward. Let me get in here and show you what I was talking about trusting your straight edge. This is fixing to go underneath the needle, and look. The straight edge of the border is right here, and that's the way it's supposed to be. My bias cuts are a little bit more narrow right there. I'm going to trust this straight edge. I don't want to tug this. I want it to lay flat. If you tug it, you're going to get all kinds of ripples, and it's going to change the shape of your block. So I'm going to sew directly to that point and then come off of it and aim back toward my 1/4 inch. My husband has decided now is the time to mow the grass. And now do the same for the opposite side. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with fabric G. Okay, we are ready to put on our triangles. That's going to be the background for our embroidery. Now, what I recommend you do is you want to fold these point to point, and it's hard to tell because it's white on white. This is right side up, so you want to fold it wrong sides together, get the points together, okay, and then align it with the center seam of your heart. Align that fold with the center seam of your heart. It's the easiest way. And then lay it, open it up, and they should be right sides together. And pin. That looks good. And same to the opposite side. We're ready for the next one. Again, wrong sides together. Put it to the center of the heart. Fold it open. Okay. Now when you begin sewing this one, you want to start sewing all the way out here where it meets. Don't start in here where you think the inner border is. You want to start all the way out there. Okay, this looks good. I'm going to go press it, and then we're going to trim them. We do need a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of the sides here. This one looks like it's right at 1/4. That one looks like it's a little too big. So the square of your block is supposed to be at 18 right now. I need a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and what I'm going to do is take my ruler and I'm going to put my 1/4 inch line right on the tip out here. Like I had talked about in the video for nesting seams, I am going to make sure so I can see that's my measurement point. I'm going to pull the ruler down until it is straight with an edge, this edge of the fabric down here. I have a straight line right here. I'm at 1/4 inch right there, and I've got a straight measurement up here at the top. So I can go ahead and trim this. And I took off like this much. Now, if you're not trusting this, if you don't have the edge of your fabric straight, leave yourself enough room on your mat. Okay, you can use, you kind of got to work with it a little bit. I'm going to put this right on my 1/4 inch right here at the tip. I'm going to look for a line, a seam line, my little, there's a straight line right there. And this dotted line from where I've got it is going right through where the blocks meet. Let me turn it just a little bit. There, now that's straight, fairly straight with the fabric edge and straight. So don't just use one point when you cut. Use as many points of reference as you can get. So it says square up your new block to measure 18 by 18. I'm not going to do that because if I do that, I'm going to lose my 1/4 inch seam allowances right here. So that means I'm going to have an extra 1/8 inch, at least this way, And I'm consistent. I'm 18 1/4 right here as well. Yep, I'm 18 1/4. And that's okay. I'm still going to put the borders on. These are bias. You can make them work for you on the bias. So we're going to make this work so that the excess fabric gets pulled up and eased in with the feed dogs.